Best advice I ever got in security. Go.
The best advice I've ever received in security is that complexity is a vulnerability.
It's time to begin the CISO Series podcast.
Welcome to the CISO Series podcast. My name is David Spark. I am the producer of said CISO Series. And joining us as our co-host, you know him very well, it is the principal over at Duha, Andy Ellis. Andy, say hello to the audience.
Hello to the audience.
There you go.
I thought I'd try something new today.
It's like the classic line of walk this way, and then they all sort of walk in the same silly motion. It's an old gag. We are available at CISOseries.com, where you can check out all of our other wonderful programming. We have 4 other shows on our network. Go discover them. No need to explain now. Our sponsor for today's episode is Native, the cloud security control plane for the enterprise. And guess what? We're going to be talking a lot about cloud security on this show. And in fact, they're responsible for today's guest, who I will introduce in just a second. But Andy, something unique just happened. You and I just got back from RSA, and we both, within an hour, just published our summaries of the event. Yours was different than mine.
Yep.
Give us a quick synopsis of what your post was about, which, by the way, the volume you did was insane.
Yep. So I walked the entire show floor, recorded 607 exhibitors.
That's a lot.
And wrote the state of security vendors, which was my impressions as a buyer who also does marketing of what marketers think they're selling, who's in what spaces, given a view towards like, where's the money coming from for VCs, where are they actually sort of investing in, to sort of get this overarching view of what's going on. I got to say, about 10% of the vendors had zero messaging on their booths at all. No idea what they did. I mean, I knew some of their names, but it was kind of crazy how many. Couldn't tell what they did from what was on their booth.
Well, so this is a conversation, and people listening to the show may have heard me say this before. I remember I was walking the floor with Adam Click, who is a CISO himself, and I just said, look at all those names out there. What percentage would you say you know what they do? And just shooting from the hip, he said like maybe 25%, which may actually, I think, could be high. But think about this.
Yeah, so my 10% is there's no hint at all as to what they do.
No, I get that.
Now, like, but 37% said they did AI security, and I still don't know what that means.
Right. But the reason I bring this up is this says a lot about just the industry of security. That if you're talking with some of the smartest people in the industry who should be in the know, and at the most, by the way, I've asked this question of many CISOs, and the highest number I ever get is 25%, which again is shooting from the hip. I know if we actually put them to the task, it'd be a different story. But if the smartest people in the industry have a 25% clue of what's going on in the market, that is a mess. Because I'm think about it in any other industry, like automotive or health or something. I can't imagine the smartest people have a 25% clue of what's going on.
So I think that you're asking the wrong question, because I do agree we have a problem, but that number isn't the indicator.
What is the indicator?
Imagine if you went to an automobile show that was aimed at the manufacturers, not at consumers.
Right.
So it is every sub in the entire industry. Yeah, if you walked in and said to some random, car designer, how many of those vendors do you know what they do a priori? They're going to tell you 25%. The market is massive.
No, I think it would be much higher. I argued.
No, because if you work for Ford, you know all of Ford subs, but you don't know all of Toyota subs. And so you don't necessarily know, like, the person who makes the fiber optic channels for Toyota might not be your vendor.
Right.
So you might not know who they are. And there's a lot of little vendors at RSA. We should remember that.
Yes, there's a ton. Well, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And you were able to...
I should say RSAC because they've insisted that media call them RSAC this year.
Oh, well, RSAC. There they go. Let's get on with our show, which is far more important. Let me bring on our guests for today's episode. Thrilled to have them on board. They've been a new sponsor with the CISO series, and we're thrilled to be working with them. From Native, the CEO and co-founder, our sponsor guest, none other than Amit Megiddo. Amit, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, David. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
The Great CISO Challenge.
What is a CISO's real power? Is a CISO really needed in a moment of crisis? I've spoken to a few CISOs who challenge their employees with the question, what would you do if I wasn't there? Quote, when your team says, we did it ourselves, you have achieved the highest level of leadership, said CISO Tradecraft in their newsletter. Now, this philosophy also leans into the Socratic method of education. You don't tell people what to do, but rather let them discover it on their own. Maybe you have to guide them, but you let them come to a final decision. Now, my father, who was a doctor, used to do this with his medical students. They'd ask my father, what would he do? And he didn't want to just tell them immediately. He wanted them to look at the patient or the case study and figure it out for themselves. So if they were missing a key piece of evidence, he would point it out to them. So, Andy, I will ask you the same thing. How do you train your staff so they can think critically and ultimately not need you?
So I think the Socratic method is a component and a tool in the toolbox, but I've known a lot of leaders who think that's the only thing they have to do. And there's a lot of people who don't learn well with that because you're not actually helping them if you just always are challenging them. Well, what would you do if I wasn't here? Their answer is, I don't know because you've never told me or you've never shown me. So it's a combination of show them, tell them, give them an opportunity to do something with safety rails before you're going to sort of put them out on their own. And I'm a big fan of starting with escalations as the place where most people need more help, but the person who needs the most help is the leader at the top, the CISO. You should look at every time you overrule your staff that they have told somebody something and their boss or they come to you and you change what the ruling is, right? Your people say, well, you can't do that. And you say, well, you can do it as long as you do these few things. That means you did not put your person in a position. Either they didn't know that they could have that flexibility, and they should. It should be that nobody gets a better deal by escalating. If they escalate, it gets worse because you're saying, wow, I had to get involved, and that's not the right thing. My people should give you the best possible deal for the business, and it's when you escalate that you're making the deals not work so well. So that's what the way I like to think about it is they should always be able to put themselves, they being your staff, put themselves in your shoes. What would my boss do so that I can do that?
You know, Jarek Beeson says the same thing. He has the challenge, what would Jarek think or what would Jarek do? Jarek Beeson being the CISO of WM and a frequent guest and co-host on this show. All right, Amit, I'm throwing the same thing to you. I guess the question is, how do you let your staff know how to operate completely without you?
This actually, I'm sort of hearing this question. I go through like different stages in my career, and I'm thinking how this equates. So first of all, background, spent over a decade in A200 Israeli military intelligence units, and there's like a common saying when you're trained up to become a young officer, which is the officer is measured or graded sort of in his absence. You learn that very early. I then, next step for me was I did my MBA, Andy, not too far from where you are at Harvard Business School. And right, that's all about the case method, right? No answers. It's not a lesson and you start and you get to the final answer. It's here's a challenge or a situation a business leader was put in, and now 90 students get to discuss it and reach together the best answer. And then the last stage, like sort of before starting Native, was at AWS for close to 6 years. And there it's all about process, right? Like you're operate at that scale. It's all about how is the process built to get to the best outcome and how do you learn from mistakes? So it's not someone's fault, but how could the process be improved? And sort of all of these build up to where I am now. And then, by the way, Andy, also on what you said, escalation. It's such a core thing sort of in the Amazon culture. Like escalation is a good thing. Like not you get dinged for not escalating. Escalating is not a political move. It's a customer obsessed move. And then where I am now, I think a core thing to it as I think about it now, building my own company, it's first of all finding the right partners to work with, right? You can't do everything. And it's first of all, you need to trust the partners you work with and your senior leadership. So it starts with hiring. You need to hire people that you can trust to make a lot of decisions day to day without you being there. And then it's also, I think, this gradual process of letting go. And how do you build that trust with your people that work for you? And also it's sort of always that back and forth at a young startup. You don't want too much process, right? You want to move fast, but you also want to make sure that in the end things work well. So finding that right balance. But right now where I am, it's all about trust in the people that work closely with me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the pre-escalation. Teach your people to escalate to you when they're about to say something that they know will escalate to you anyway. They should just reach out to you and say, here's what I'm planning on doing. Here's what I want. Mm-hmm. And you can then easily redirect them before it becomes a problem rather than afterwards.
What's the best time to do this?
Quote, business wants to go quickly and time to value is absolutely important. Cyber becomes an afterthought, end quote. For EY America's Ayan Roy, as quoted in a recent CISO online piece, cloud misconfigurations aren't a technical problem. They reflect organizational priorities. Dev teams spinning up resources with elevated privileges they never walk back, security teams excluded from the conversations that matter, and security sprawl from M&A are the symptoms. And the cloud providers aren't helping. Microsoft, Google, and Amazon hand you an insecure product by default and leave you to figure out the rest. Exposed S3 buckets are a trite cliche at the point, yet the misconfigurations are worse, not better. 70% of Azure VMs are misconfigured, 63% of Google Cloud Platform. So if the tools, the frameworks, and the awareness all exist, why does this keep happening? Is cloud security fundamentally a business velocity problem that security is always working around? What's one structural move a CISO could focus on, Amit, I'm throwing this to you, that would make the biggest difference in turning the tide on misconfigurations? By the way, this is a story that comes up again and again and again. What's your take?
So first of all, I'll start with answering the question directly, and then maybe I'll take a step back. Answering directly, what should a CISO do to sort of address this issue? I think for too long, we've sort of let these things happen, and then fixing them after the thought is a huge challenge. We can get into why. I think the one thing is to start at the architecture level, right? How do we ensure that the architecture, the secure by design architecture that went through the review actually is translated into an enforceable architecture at the CSP, at the cloud service provider level?
By the way, we're going to get more into this secure by design a little bit later in the show, but continue on.
So that's the one thing you can do. How can you sort of close that gap between what the good architecture looks like and what does reality look like? But taking a step back, for sure, I sort of say, the business is doing business, right? It's not security. In the end, security is there to support the business. If the business isn't producing great product and, going to market and making money, then there's no point in it at all. And security has sort of historically found itself always lagging behind because there's a new technological trend. There's a new way to do something better, produce better product, go to market better. The business runs forward as it should, and security sort of then plays catch up. And that's what we've often been seeing as well, right? In the cloud as well, where there's sort of this endless sort of menu of how you can do different things, and the business will run fast and make mistakes or maybe intentional things that open up to risk. And that's sort of how we ended up here. And I think, first of all, that's the preferred state. We don't want security to slow down. The question is, for the CISO, how can you both enable the business, maybe even allow it to move faster? I'll get to that in a moment, without lowering the standards. How can you now build that expertise and confidence to tell the business, you can go into a new cloud. We're on AWS and we want to go into Google Cloud. How can we do that without lowering the standards? We're now running on AWS and we want to adopt or Azure and we want to build new AI applications. How can we do that without lowering the standards? The security always should think in the terms of how can I be a business enabler?
All right, Andy, your take on this as well. It seems like this problem never goes away. We're constantly misconfiguring.
So I think cybersecurity has always been an afterthought. So I want us to be cautious that this isn't a new dynamic. What's just changed is the pace.
Right.
It used to be that by the time a developer could get an application into production, they had to go fight with IT to get a server. And those of us who remember the hassle of dealing with networking, by then security had figured out what was going on and could come in and provide hopefully some help. And the challenge that we're running into right now is somebody has a clever idea for an app and it is live and in production by the end of the day. So there is no lag for a human to show up and say, oh, you should do these things. And so I think if we want to stop being the afterthought, it needs to go from you should do these things to we have already done these things for you. That we become a service model and we think of ourselves as enablers, that we will make your system secure before you even have to think about it.
I think to your point, Andy, I think an ironic part of this is that with security being the afterthought to allow the business to run fast, down the road, it just slows everybody down, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
We let all those issues happen, and now security has a long queue. They can't just go and fix them, right? Things are already running in the environment. So what happens? You open the ticket, you start the campaign. I've been on the receiving end of those building products at AWS, and 20-30% of engineering time would go in security campaigns. They're needed, they're necessary, they're there because of everything we discussed, but ends up trying to allow the business to run fast, but in the end, sort of just slowing it down the road.
Yep.
Cloud providers ship powerful built-in controls, but most teams struggle to turn security intent into consistent enforcement across AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and OCI. Different policy models force security teams into manual translation and one-off exceptions, which get brittle fast as accounts, services, APIs, and AI workloads change. Our sponsor, Native, is the secure by design control plane for cloud security. It helps teams operationalize provider-native enforcement, manage intent centrally, and roll out changes safely at scale. Native works through the cloud's own mechanisms, so guardrails are enforced natively, while teams can preview impact before deployment and reduce drift over time. With Native, security isn't bolted on after the fact, like what we were just talking about. It becomes part of how you operate the cloud. If you want to learn more, you got to go to their website. Go to native.security. It's just spelled exactly the way it sounds, NATIVE.security. Go there. And when you go there and you find out more, let them know that you learned about them from the CISO series.
It's time to play What's Worse?
Amit, I'm pretty sure you know how to play this game, correct?
I play them with my kids occasionally, so I'll give it a shot.
Yes, you do.
I'm usually not on the receiving end, but
You get to go second on the bright side. I have to answer first.
Yes, you do. So I'm going to...
okay.
This is two bad scenarios brought to us from a listener. This is from Louis Zhang of AIA Australia. They're both crappy, and you have to decide which one is the worst scenario, the one you would like the least. It is a risk management exercise. All right. Andy, you are a CISO of a high-growth, budget-tight company. Here's the first scenario. It's the beautiful security strategy that nobody follows. You hire a strong enterprise security architect, clean target state architecture, standardized controls for technology stacks, clear security baselines, governance framework in place, an ambitious multi-year roadmap. On paper, it's world-class. Then the reality hits. The business moves too fast. Teams bypass design reviews. Exceptions quietly become the norm. Cloud environments drift within weeks. Shadow IT and shadow AI thrive. Nothing critical gets built the way it was designed. You have a great strategy, but limited to no enforcement. At least you...
I suspect it wasn't even designed safe. Let's be honest, people are going to ignore your design style too.
There you go. Well, at least you have something polished to report to the board and the auditors. So you have something that looks good.
I mean, I really want to know what could possibly be worse than this because you're basically useless. But let's see.
Okay, hold on. Second one's bad. This is the second scenario. Secure projects, zero architecture. You skip the enterprise architect. Instead, you hire multiple transactional security solution architects and contractors to, quote, build it secure. So we're going into chaos here. Get ready. Projects go live with reasonable security controls. However, every team does it differently. Different tooling, IAM models, logging standards, and cloud patterns. To make it worse, high mobility among solution architects leads to inconsistent, sometimes conflicting decisions across projects. The stack explodes, complexity compounds, no North Star, no baselines. Everyone is optimized for speed. So you have delivery, but no cohesive security strategy. Security becomes structured chaos with good intentions. The quality varies upon whoever happens to be on the project at the time, and you feel nothing is under control. All right, which one is worse?
Okay, so I'm still going to go with the first one is worse.
Okay, because the second one sounds pretty bad.
But I have to bring up the near rule, because anybody listening is like, well, if I get to change, which one would I rather inherit? You probably want to inherit the first one, because you're like, well,
right.
I can walk in and do enforcement if I've got a coherent, like everybody does it the same way. But here's the reality. Nobody will ever do it that way, because the near rule says we don't get to change the near future. We're stuck with this. So either I have an on paper, beautiful architecture that nobody actually implements, which means they have no security architecture at all. Or in the second one, sure, I don't even know what my architecture is, but at least I have one. And generally it's pretty decent. It's reasonable. These folks are doing.
Well, it's all over the map. There are holes in this thing like Swiss cheese.
But the other one doesn't even have the cheese. It's nothing but the hole. In the first one, I don't actually have a security program at all. Like there's something written down. That's not a security program. That's vaporware. I would much rather have the second, where I've got people actually out helping make things marginally better. Yes, I know my successor is going to have an awful future, but that is not part of the scenario, is what my successor gets. It's only what I'm stuck with. So I would rather have the second. First one is worse. We're not doing anything from a security perspective.
All right. I throw this to you, Amit. Agree or disagree?
I was really looking forward to disagreeing with Andy, but but yeah, I have to agree with him. And I think the main reason is sort of like what it points to, like the organizational culture and what's the harder gap to bridge, right? Like if you sat for hours and you know what good looks like, but you don't have the organization expertise or culture to actually do something about it, that's a huge gap. Whereas if you didn't do that exercise, but there is that motion in the organization to implement, to push architectural controls into the environment, you're in a better situation. And then that gap you have to bridge is, okay, now let's understand what is the current state, where are the gaps, what does good look like, and you have to go and do the work. In either case, you have to go to do the work, but the first one sounds much more daunting work of even finding the right people that can have the expertise and the want to do it. So I have to agree with Andy on this one.
All right. Andy gets another win.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm really happy that Nir tossed that rule at us, because he threw it at me, because I used to modify the scenarios and be like, well, because in the old world, I'd have been like, well, I would take the first one because I can make it better. And so he gave us the rule of you can't make these better. You're stuck with them.
You're stuck with these. Yes. None of these would be bad if you could change scenarios.
Right.
Yeah, I'll say like from a native perspective, it's sort of like the first one is like sounds really appealing to me, because like I'm building a company that can take that greatness that you sat in a room and did, and now we can help you implement it. But really, like that is like a totally non-ICP for us, right? Because there's no one there that is even, we'd rather be in an organization that is trying to do it. There's people doing it, there's showing initiative, and now we come and help them rather than like just
It's chaos.
Yeah.
Right, but it's chaos in which you can show up and survival of the fittest. Give them something that actually works.
Right.
And get adoption that way. I like that.
There's a person in the organization that cares.
Yeah.
Maybe it falls down to that. Yeah.
Please, enough. No, more.
Today, we're talking about secure by design in the cloud. It was Amit just referenced it just moments ago, but I'm going to start with you, Andy. What have you heard enough about with secure by design in the cloud, and what would you like to hear a lot more?
So when people say secure by design, I've been hearing that my entire career. So I'll be honest, it's one of those phrases that makes me go, oh, just for a moment, because almost every time I've heard it, it's somebody who's basically saying, I want to design from scratch. Fresh blank sheet of paper, I'm going to build the most perfect thing. Rather than saying, how do I design for success? And sit down, and I don't have to build from scratch. I've got a lot of tools. We're building on top of the shoulders of not just giants, but also lots and lots of people. How do we implement successfully so that we end up with security, and we don't have to design new security in with every single thing we do, because it already exists for us? That's what I want to hear more about.
All right. That's a good take. All right, Amit, this is your bailiwick. This is what native is all about. First, let's start about what have you heard enough about with secure by design in the cloud? And then what would you like to hear a lot more and explain what native is doing?
Again, agree with Andy on this one. Andy, you're good. I've heard enough secure by design, right? It's been going around for so long. And I think the reason for that is that in any like intuitive, logical, way you think about it, it's makes sense, right? What would you rather be, secure by design, or what's the alternative?
Right. Exactly.
Not secure by design. So of course that makes sense. And that's why we've been hearing about it for so long. I think the gap has always been that as an industry, we weren't mature enough to actually go there, right? We moved to the cloud. We first sort of needed to know what can go wrong. It was also easier for vendors to come and build visibility, observability, scanning capabilities that don't add friction to the environment. Gave the security, the CISO, that, initial feeling of at least I know what's going on and I can start to manage it. So on the one hand, as an industry, we maybe weren't mature enough. Also, the tools to allow us to drive secure by design infrastructure weren't mature enough, right? The cloud providers have been AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud. We support all four. They've invested heavily. If you look at their roadmap and big announcements from the past year to 3 years, they're all around secure by design tools and capabilities to give you, or controls and capabilities to drive that. And then 3, so the industry's mature, the capabilities, the cloud providers give you now the controls to do it. 3, it's necessary now, right? We're now in a world increasingly, this will launch in a while. So maybe by the time this launches, everyone will actually know what the cloud mythos is, right? And it's not just going to be a leak. But right now, we're moving increasingly into a world where the scale and speed of AI augmented attacks, there is no other option, right? This old approach of let's scan the environment, see what's wrong, open tickets, fix them, is just no longer sustainable. And that's why we sort of reached this conclusion, really going back to my years at AWS as well, building a lot of the native detection capabilities, right? I helped launch and scale Amazon GuardDuty. My co-founder was in Security Hub. We saw this from the inside, but then we saw also what good looks like when the more architectural controls are pushed into the environment, and what does secure by design look like, and how can you build a more proactive cloud security program? The challenge is that it's hard to do, right? Because going back to that previous what's worse situation, we can now know what good looks like. We can help you map that. But now there's the question of how do I actually push changes into the environment? How do I know what I want to achieve and then translate that into actual cloud service provider architecture? And from that cloud service provider architecture, translate that into actual enforcement controls that I can deploy in the environment. How do I make sure they're safe to deploy, right? This is no longer coming from the outside, scanning, pointing at what's wrong. This is driving architectural change into the environment. So we invested a lot in R&D into capabilities to simulate the impact of a enforcement control before you implement it. Is it safe to introduce this architectural change to an environment or not? You now deploy this architectural change in the environment. Is the control I put in place today, is it relevant tomorrow? In a year from now? AWS just launched a new database. Azure just launched a new region. Someone in your organization just needs an exception just for a moment here. How do I make sure all of this stays operational, breathing and living over time? All of these are very hard challenges in a single cloud enterprise, let alone in some of the largest enterprises, multi-cloud enterprises we're working with in the world today. And that's what we built, that end-to-end platform control plane. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. So I referenced Adam Glick being on the show floor, and I remember very soon after I was asking him the question about how many vendors he knows, he said something specifically about drift and saying, I would like to know, and it sounds native can do this, you correct me if I'm wrong here. He said, I want to know when I set something up today, 6 months from a year from now, how out of whack is it?
Yeah.
Does it give you a clue as to, or are you adjusting for drift over time? Like, what is native doing?
100% huge problem. Sort of that secure architecture that went through the review and was deployed today, what changes over time. So first of all, native monitors for it constantly, right? So we can identify now how your organization is behaving, if there's new requirements or needs or exceptions, and we will alert, we will sort of tell you about it in real time, as well as monitor the changes from the cloud providers, right? AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, they all constantly change their API and their services. So a big piece of it is sort of that constant bridging of the gap between the policy intent you defined and the actual what happens in the ground in reality and API level in the cloud providers.
Andy, you know what this is like? It's like using a payroll service provider that tells you what all the local tax laws are so you don't have to friggin' deal with it.
Yes, absolutely. I have a colleague that used to say, if you pave the road, you know it's flat. And the challenge with drift monitoring, the way most people think about it, is it's like pothole reporting. It's like, oh, we're going to go look for the pothole, and when we get enough potholes, we'll try to go deal with them. And if instead you say, no, I will have flat roads, I go pave them every day. And so the moment there's a deviation, you just fix it. Like, it completely changes the experience for everybody else because they're not trying to work around potholes or road crews. They just have flat roads to operate on.
Right, because when we say drift, it's not another, here's a misconfiguration. It's here's a change in how the environment is architected to not allow the misconfiguration.
Right.
You designed it today. You said the environment is now designed to allow the business to move fast within the architecture that doesn't allow it to open up the environment to risk. Mm-hmm. And now what we monitor for is not, is there a misconfiguration or, risk? That cannot happen. The environment is designed to not allow it. What we now monitor for is the change in the architecture of the environment. If all of a sudden it is open up to allow these sort of risk into the environment. And then we'll help you. Either you could literally click a button in native and we'll revert back to the old state. You could also say this is an accepted new state, but we'll constantly monitor what is happening in reality versus what you defined as good looks like.
Is AI going to help us or hurt us?
Is product security about to hit a wall we're not ready for? Cameron W. of Teradata framed the issue succinctly on LinkedIn. Quote, if AI can find and fix vulnerabilities in critical open source faster, cheaper, and more thoroughly than traditional methods, where does that leave the product security team in 2 years? Are we still running the same SCA scanners and triaging the same CVE backlogs? Or does the role shift entirely toward governance, AI model risk, and supply chain integrity for a code base that's increasingly machine generated? End quote. So Andy, I start with you. Do you see that happening? And will it be the only way to manage AI generated code bases? Because they're going to be making a lot of them.
I would love to see that world, but I don't think we're headed for that. I think we've got a different disaster on the horizon.
And that is?
Walking the show floor, the most vendors at RSA are in application security. Mm-hmm. The number of vendors trying to tackle this problem with 18 different ways. The problem has never been our ability to find vulnerabilities.
No.
Has never been the ability to create patches for those vulnerabilities. And it has always been the inability of security teams to get development teams to actually integrate those fixes for a lot of reasons. Like SDLCs are really complicated. They do not self-heal. Lots of issues in there.
By the way, I will say 99% of these vendors will say, oh yeah, we'll connect with your Jira system. We'll connect with this. And it's, you're all doing the same thing. So it's like,
right. We'll connect and we'll make it easier for you to issue tickets to a team that's going to ignore them. Functionally, that's the problem. Like, we had an entire industry space that was SOAR, security operations and automated response, didn't really go anywhere. Why? Because at the other end of it, nobody trusts security to issue a change and just let that change go out. It has to go through change management that everybody's going to fight. So until we get to AI managed code bases, like, we're not going to see a massive change here. What is fascinating, and I was very glad to see when Cloud Code did this, when it was like, oh, let's go actually find vulnerabilities in open source. I have been yelling this to every vendor out there who claims to do vulnerability research for 20 years. If you think you're great at vulnerability research, please go find the vulnerabilities in open source so we can all learn from them. But that doesn't mean people are actually taking those new versions, or it doesn't mean they're taking the minimal versions that are becoming increasingly available. Here's only what you need. That's where we need to get to. I don't think we're going to have AI managed code bases writ large for a while. We'll have AI in charge of code bases, but I don't think they'll be well managed.
All right, Amit, I'm throwing this to you. What's your take? It'd be wonderful if all of this was handled automatically, but if we're creating so much machine-generated AI code, something's got to give here.
Yeah, I think as so often in security, it's back to basics and back to fundamentals, right? Like the CISO from Amazon, CJ Moses, published a few weeks ago a report about an attack viewed from within AWS that was a single, non-sophisticated actor leveraging AI in practically every part of the chain. It was able, over a very short period of time, to target close to 600 targets. And that's what made the headlines. If you go into the actual blog and you read it, there were targeted organizations that ultimately were not breached or did not escalate to any business impact, and they had the fundamental defenses in place. AI is going to increase like amazingly fast, and any gap in your architecture it will find, and it will find it fast, and it will exploit it. So the question is, do you have the basic controls, the architectural controls in place to prevent that proactively? I think there was another interesting one was around, you now have also, this is from the angle of the code driving changes and, agents in your environment, right? This was also coincidentally also an Amazon case from a few weeks ago where their coding agent drove an infrastructure change, deleted a database table, and brought part of their production environment down for 13 hours. Again, so AI is now both a threat from the outside, from the inside. I think, again, it goes back to why did we have, 10 agents running production changes today? How many is it going to be tomorrow? 1,000? 1 million? Rather than, again, chasing each one of those, defining what they can do, what they can't do, it's back to fundamentals. In this production environment, maybe just Andy and Amit can delete the production database tables and no one else, right? And maybe we need each other's approval as well, right? Just in case, Andy, maybe you've gone rogue.
I don't think you want me able to delete your production tables.
But so again, back to fundamentals. How do we architect the environment, put in the right controls so that both from the outside and inside, we're ready for this wave that is already here and coming. And then the speed that it's coming, I believe it's going down the AI versus AI, right? Like we need the fundamental controls in place, but they need to be able to adapt at the speed. Sort of that mean time to adapt has to go down to zero. If now the threat detection layer somewhere in the world identifies a new attack vector that AI is doing, or there's a new vulnerability that was discovered, or we need now security to be native to the environment, need to shift down into the platform, into the infrastructure so it can continuously adapt and bring that adaptation time down to zero so it knows now what is the latest way that the AI is going to attack it, and the defenses immediately are put up in accordance. And that's where I think things are going. We need to sort of back to fundamentals, but do everything at AI speed natively in the environment.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to the tail end of this very show. I want to thank Amit and I want to thank Andy, but I also want to thank Amit's company, and that would be Native. Remember, the cloud security control plane for the enterprise. Amit, I'm going to let you have the very last word. If you have an offer or anything that you would like to give to our audience, and also, for that matter, if you're hiring over at Native, by the way, let me remind everybody that their website is native.security. Go check it out there. Any last words from you, Amit?
First of all, yes, we're hiring across functions. We're growing very fast, and opportunity to work with really some of the foremost experts in this space and with security teams across the most forward-thinking organizations and companies out there. So big opportunity. We welcome anyone can reach me directly on LinkedIn as well. I think it's back to sort of, we touched on it on different points throughout the show, right? Where things are moving very fast. It's about how do we adapt to it. I think it's hard for us to predict now what things are going to look like. I think it's that continuous adaptation to this changing reality. And in the end, I think the fundamental shift we're going to see across security, we're starting with cloud, but across security is that shift down where security is part of the infrastructure, part of the services, part of the platforms where we're building and operating. And that's what will allow us ultimately to adapt quickly enough to this changing landscape. But yeah, it was great being here. Andy, always great to chat. And yeah, thank you, David.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to our audience. As I always say, and I always mean, we greatly appreciate your contributions and for listening to the CISO Series podcast.
That wraps up another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. We have lots more shows on our website, CISOseries.com. Please join us on Fridays for our live shows, Super Cyber Friday, our virtual meetup, and Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. This show thrives on your input. Go to the Participate menu on our site for plenty of ways to get involved, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@cisoseries.com. Thank you for listening to the CISO Series podcast.